London is a melting pot of cultures. The cosmopolitan city over the years has become the home for people from countries around the globe. Though the Commonwealth connection accounts for a part of this transformation, much of the multicultural population are immigrants who came to the country as refugees or asylum seekers. Despite restrictive immigrant laws, continuous influx of asylum seekers from many countries increased the population along the outer areas of Greater London. The 2011 ethnicity map of London shows that the communities in London can be broadly classified as whites, blacks, Asians, and mixed. Of the total population of Greater London, the Asians accounts for 18.5%, which includes Chinese, Indians, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and Sri Lankans. During the 1960s and 70s, small numbers of professionals emigrated to the UK from Sri Lanka and settled in a few parts of inner and outer London like Southall, Hounslow, and East Ham. The Sri Lankans accounted for 0.39% of London's population in 1991, which has increased to 1.54% over the last 2 decades. This substantial descent in the Sri Lankan population in London was due to the migration of the Sri Lankan Tamils as asylum seekers to the UK during the Sri Lankan Civil War. Between 1984 and 2004, a total of 49,000 asylum applications were made by Sri Lankans, nearly all of whom were likely to have been Tamils.
I remember it was the beginning of the Civil War, and the military troops had already evacuated people from Jaffna, my native, and raided the office where I was working, accusing that we were sending people abroad to get military training, which was not the case. I was not even given a chance to explain, but was already on the wanted list. So I had to run away with my friends to the UK from Ceylon in need of protection and a job. I boarded a direct flight to London with 74 other Tamils. It was the start of mass exodus. When I reached the UK, I was allowed to stay in an asylum on humanitarian grounds. The asylums were typically large, full board hostels with shared bedrooms, living, and social areas with 3 meals a day. We were also given basic necessities and a transport facility for medical related appointments. During the initial period, I had to work as a mechanic in the mornings, and in the evenings, I headed back to the camp and helped in the asylum. That was the worst period, which affected me emotionally, as there was a constant influx of people from home. Within a period of 6 months, I was able to secure a paid job as an advisor at the Refugee Council. This gave me hope and a proper living. My life was getting better slowly. I applied for citizenship under the right to remain and settled here. During my initial period, the asylums were usually allotted in the suburbs of London area, where the housing availability was in excess, and mine was in East Ham. East Ham, a shopping and residential district of London, well known as a locality of Asians, had around 3.2% of Sri Lankans in 1991. Since then, the Sri Lankan migrant population has increased to around 6% at present. I mostly walked to all my destinations, and sometimes took the tube or the bus when I had to travel far from my locality. Other alternative transports, like cars and taxis, weren't an option for me as they were very expensive. When I came to London in 1985, the footpaths near the East Ham tube station were very narrow and were exposed to the carriageway, increasing the vulnerability of rushing passengers of tube. However, the area in East Ham have had conspicuous changes over the years. A suburb, which was designated primarily for asylum seekers, had now changed its identity as Little India of London due to the presence of Indian migrants. People have come and settled here, setting up stores and restaurants to cater for themselves as well as the community. Coming from the neighboring country of India, we have a lot of similarities in our culture. As the Asian population increased, East Ham was appropriated by setting up temples along the high street, and a plethora of Asian shops were established on either side of it. As the Asian market developed in the high street, you could see us, the Sri Lankans, setting up restaurants across the street, and mine being one of them. This restaurant gave me a better lifestyle where I had bought a terraced house through owned by mortgage in Tennyson Avenue, which is very close to the high street as well as close to the Blanchett Park, so that the kids could have enough access to play areas. I have a car now, but I still prefer to take the tube if I have to go work in the central part of London, as the congestion and ULEZ charges make the car ride very expensive. The streets near the East Ham station at present have wide footpaths with guardrails on roadside to separate the pedestrian movements from the vehicles in the carriageway. Owning a restaurant in East Ham helped me to connect better with the locals. This gave me an opportunity to become the local councillor of East Ham Central. My life has had a visible change over the years from the time I stepped into the UK to becoming a councillor of a ward in London.
He was fortunate enough in getting the right opportunities at the right point of time in his life and elevated his economic status in the city. However, this was not the case for everyone who entered with him in the 1980s into the UK. The procedures for seeking asylum have changed drastically over the years. It is difficult to convince the Home Office for a refugee status, and there are chances of your application getting rejected. However, people are given long-term temporary accommodations in the HMOs or self-contained accommodation during the process. An Aspen card is provided and around £40 is credited per week per person for their living needs. If a refugee status is granted, the person is provided with a biometric residence permit which shows his eligibility to work, claim mainstream benefits, and look for a private housing in the UK like any other resident of the UK. Once the leave for the remain is granted, asylum seekers are to arrange for alternative houses and secure a job in 28 days. Job Centre Plus and accommodation providers support them in getting a job and house respectively in the UK. London's transformation into a multi-ethnic city was the legacy of its colonial past. Entry into the UK was easy in 1985. However, survival became hard for the asylum seekers due to the indisputable cultural difference. The Asian communities in a few boroughs eased their way through. Choices that the city had for the refugees in terms of housing, transport, and job provided a certainty in their lives. Now, post-Brexit, the UK government has introduced the Nationality and Borders Bill to tackle the illegal immigration and the inadmissible asylum claims made by the people, which has made asylum seeking in UK difficult.
I don't know if I would have had the same opportunity if I had come to London any other period of time. The restrictive rules have made things more difficult. Though my heart beats back to go home, I'm skeptical about a life in Sri Lanka as good as I have here in London. Being in the council, I want to contribute in creating a city that provides enough opportunities for all the helpless individuals entering London in tough situations.